I'm excited to welcome this week's Tiara Talk Show guest, singer Heidi Mollenhauer, to the show. Welcome, Heidi. It's so wonderful to speak to you today.
Oh, thank you. It's really wonderful to speak to you.
My mother was extremely excited because her favorite Disney song of all time is God Help the Outcasts. So I told her about this and she's like, oh my gosh, what? Really? So...
Oh, that's so sweet. Had I known, I would have sent her something.
Oh, well, I didn't know that you still did cabarets because you did one pretty close by to where it was, and I would have totally brought her along with myself because we would be cheering you on from the front row. And did you have, like, what was your theater background? How did you transition into the theater world? How did you find that was something you were so passionate about?
Well, I started singing professionally when I was 14. And I was already interested in voice, and I had actually started studying with an opera singer in New York, and at that time I was very interested in theater. And so I kind of followed my nose and followed that path, as well as I started singing in one of the piano bars in New York, one of the very well-known, lovely, wonderful piano bars in New York, Brandy's on the Upper East Side. And through that, I started working there, and I ended up also working at the Duplex, the old Duplex. Don't Tell Mamas, 88s, and I met some incredible people there. And a pianist that I was working with introduced me to a wonderful singer named Nancy Lamott, who's no longer with us. And she was the one who talked me into doing my very first solo cabaret show when I was about 18 or 19. So I was kind of following both paths. I signed with an agent. I think I was around 19 or 20. So I was auditioning full time through my agents, as well as doing my solo cabaret shows. So kind of doing it all at once.
Did you find that the cabaret performances were difficult to craft? Because sometimes you would like to tell a story through all of these songs. So was it difficult to pick songs in a specific order that you'd like to tell a story with sometimes?
I don't know that it was difficult necessarily. I think, depending on where we are, or at least my experience, depending on where I am in life and, where my head is, I tend to be attracted to songs that when you put them all together, suddenly they're telling a story that you didn't even know you wanted to tell. And so I mostly, I chose songs that spoke to me, emotionally, intellectually, musically. And I would always end up with too much, and we'd always have to kind of cut and winnow down. But I find that what you're attracted to in that moment, if you lay it out in front of you, it actually tells you a story. So, and storytelling and continuity was always really important to me. I didn't like to do just sort of random songs jumbled together in my shows. I tended to, have a beginning and a middle and an end and try to convey a thought or idea.
I've seen some of your performances on YouTube. Thankfully, somebody had some clips and they put them up there. So you're such a wonderful performer, because I'd never seen any video footage of you or what you looked like, as opposed to like the documentary that I found and sent to you of a Hunchback of Notre Dame. So it was really great to see you sing that song, but also your other cabaret performances, because some of those songs I've never heard of before, but they're so rich in texture and story, and I love that. I loved your selections with that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, and it's funny because I actually haven't posted any of this stuff, but I'll get an email saying, hey, I saw you on YouTube. And I'm like, wait, what? It kind of goes up without my knowing. But I think what you're talking about, which it was the Tom Waits show that I did with my partner, Bobby Pico. There's quite a bit of that somebody had the videotape, I think, inherited the videotape and uploaded it. But that show was very near and dear to my heart. I've been a huge Tom Waits fan since long before it was cool to be a Tom Waits fan. And he is one of my favorite songwriters. And Bobby Pico is a wonderful pianist that I had the privilege of working with at 88, and he and I just really hit it off from the get-go. And a while later, I made a whole bunch of, and this is before your time, cassette tapes.
Oh, I still had my Hunchback of Notre Dame cassette tape. So,
but I made him a bunch of tapes of a ton of different Tom Waits albums. And I handed them to him, and I said, yeah, I don't know if you're going to like this because it's a little offbeat, but let me know what you think, because I think that this music for you and I to do would be really quite incredible. And he had a listen, and I think he called me the next day and said, I'm in. And so he and I put that show together, and it was I'd wanted to do a show of Tom Waits' material for a long time, and it all just really fell into place with Bobby as my partner in crime.
It was great. I wish the whole thing was up because I'd love to just listen to it, because I really don't know a lot of Tom Waits songs myself, so I was introduced to a few of them that I had never heard before, so I really enjoyed that. So that was really cool.
I think that that the entire show has indeed been uploaded into 2 parts.
Oh, okay.
If you dig a little bit further. I thought that when I had heard about this, it was just a few years ago, someone had said, oh yeah, I saw you on YouTube. And I'm thinking, I've never posted anything on YouTube. I think you have the wrong person. No, it's you. But recently, somebody had said that the whole show had been uploaded, so I believe it's there.
That is so. I'm going to take a look at it after we're done.
Actually, that show as well. We put that whole thing together ourselves, and we had a wonderful little group of musicians as well doing that with us, as well as a terrific director, Jimmy Lazar, and Matt Berman, who designed all the lights and sound. And that show actually went on to win, among other things, the MAC Award for that year for Best Review, as well as every theater magazine rag, Backstage and Variety and all of that. So we were super proud of that show. I'm someone who actually, avoids social media like the plague. So,
well, it was so hard to find you, and so grateful to Kirk Wise, who is a good friend of yours and a friend of mine. And I was like, oh my gosh, Heidi? And he's like, yeah. So that worked out well. Thank you, Kirk, because I was
Trousdale. I hear you had both he and Gary on together.
Yes, we had a fun I'm an Atlantis fan through and through, so, but also a Hunchback fan. I remember seeing that, and when we saw the stage show down at Disney World when that came out, and my favorite part always was Esmeralda's song, God Help the Outcasts, and you brought this to life in the film. And as I said before, I had the album on cassette still. I still have my cassette tape and my little cassette player and play it. But I'd always rewind it and play that song. And I remember it, like, my babysitter at the time was always like, oh my gosh, again? And I was like, yes. And I would pretend like I was singing it, and I just loved it. So when did you audition for this piece? Or was this, because we had spoken a little bit before off air that you had done scratch tests, basically, of the voices. So was that a way that they chose you?
Well, so yeah, the way that it all kind of happened, they held auditions in New York, I think in Los Angeles, and probably, around the country in some of the other major performing arts cities. And so I went on a call through my agent, what they did was they actually sent the song ahead. We had to learn the song and then go in and record it with the casting agent, and they had a pianist there. And I think that was in about, March of that year, which that year would have been maybe 94, I guess. And then I didn't hear anything, which was, fine. I mean, that's auditioning in New York. You go in, you give it your best, and then you try to walk out and forget about it. But as I was waiting to go into the audition room, out comes a very good friend of mine. She had been auditioning for it as well, and she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, great." Because I've always been sort of known as the chick with the husky voice, and it was obviously to do the singing for Demi Moore, but I didn't hear anything for several months until I was actually in St. Thomas doing a club gig for 2 weeks with actually another would be later on Disney voice, Michael Woolley, and I got a call in the middle of my gig saying, "Can I go in for this session?" And they were calling it a paid audition. And I, of course, had to leave my gig early and rush back to New York, and on no sleep hit the conductor's house to learn the songs, and then go to the studio and record with Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz, which is like, what? And so that's when we actually recorded that duet, just a scratch version of that duet, as well as a scratch version of a song that they had written to potentially take the place of God Help the Outcasts. I found out later that Demi Moore really wanted to sing it, and they wanted to give her the opportunity to do it. But in the meantime, they had to kind of stay on schedule, and so they auditioned for a singing voice for her, but sort of held me off, giving her some time to work on it. And I think it wasn't until probably July, August that I had a contract.
Was that 1995 or 94? Because sometimes it takes these films like 4 years to make.
Yeah, this was in 1994. The
Wow.
film came out in 96. So it was a good solid 2 years before the movie came out.
And when we were referring to the duet, there was a song called "In a Place of Miracles" that Esmeralda and Phoebus would sing together after they found the Court of Miracles, and then the other song, "Someday."
It's a beautiful song, and actually they had used the same intro verse from God Help the Outcast as an intro verse to "Someday." And we had done I think it was at the end of the day. So Place of Miracles, we actually recorded in the studio, did a full recording of. Kevin Kline and I did a full recording of that. And at the end of that day, I did a little demo of "Someday" to just a piano track. And it was actually really lovely. I did it very quietly and very prettily. I didn't, we didn't get big or dramatic with it. And then months later, there was a note at some point to perhaps try to make it kind of more grand and sweeping. And it didn't quite work. It wasn't quite working. And even I remember having the conversation with Kirk and Gary in the booth going, I kind of feel like I'm yelling at God, did belting and sweeping. And I felt it was such an intimate moment. And so that song just wasn't working. And our producer, Don Hahn, went to Kirk and Gary and kind of said, okay, we're not sure why this isn't working, but it's just not, something's not right. And Kirk and Gary kind of said, we've got this other song, the original song, which we think is perfect. And they played my demo, I think my audition demo of that. And Don said, well, of course, that's the one. And so we ultimately found our way back full circle to God Help the Outcasts. And I'm personally, I loved "Someday" and I loved the very kind of quiet, sweet version that we did, but I was really uncomfortable with the kind of grand sweeping version.
I agree with you on that. I think that God Help the Outcasts in that moment in the film works for what it's trying to convey. And did you see the updated stage version that they did? So they included both songs, but at different points in the story. Like they kept God Help the Outcasts where it was, but they had Someday as the song the night before Esmeralda is to be put to the stake.
Oh no, I haven't seen the stage show.
Oh, really? I was wondering because they bring back Someday and they brought back In a Place of Miracles. So I was like, oh, cool. They're bringing back original material.
Well, in a Disney movie, you've got to be 90 minutes. I mean, that's what you have. And they're very strict with their timing on stuff. In a stage show, you really do have the space to expand, and it's really good to hear that some of the songs that were good but just didn't quite make the cut for the film. I'm happy to hear that they made it back in. There was also a lovely duet between Quasimodo and Esmeralda called "As Long as There's a Moon," which I remember going up to Alan Menken's studio and putting a quick track down on. And personally, I always felt like, Quasimodo and Esmeralda's relationship was the most important one. I felt like that was the one that was the story. It was their relationship and how they affected one another and supported and guided one another. But again, as long as there's a moon didn't make it in either. I think just for time.
The one thing I'm really surprised is when they would release these films, they would always try to do a special music video to promote the film. So like Celine Dion, they did the Beauty and the Beast one, and then they had one for A Whole New World, and I was always so confused why they never did something with you in a church, or actually flew you out to Notre Dame. Like that would have been pretty cool just to have you really singing there, right?
I'd like to have been flown to Notre Dame. I did go to Paris at some point with Disney. I think it was the press thing. So I did actually get to go to Notre Dame and to make my stroll toward the rose window. But yeah, I that's all in the hands of publicity and how they want to market things. So I don't have an answer to that.
What was it like to work with Kevin and do that duet with him?
Kevin is just the most lovely man. I was incredibly nervous to meet him and to work with him, and we actually met for the first time at the conductor's apartment in New York to run the song and to work on it a bit and rehearse it. And I actually remember it really clearly because I grabbed a coffee at the bodega at the corner, and I'm like walking down the street, toward the apartment building, and I'm just kind of going, oh God, oh God, oh God, and I got up to the apartment, and Kevin like answered the door, and he really worked hard to put me at ease right away, and we just had a blast. We had a really lovely time, and I attribute that 100% to him and just how down to earth and how funny and easygoing he is.
What was it like working with Alan and Steven?
It was fantastic. It was incredibly, and I was incredibly intimidated at first because how many Oscars, how many Tonys, how many awards have they both won? But this whole experience, I have to say, I don't think that there was anyone who I worked with who wasn't incredibly down to earth, kind, respectful, and just really excited about the work that they were doing. And it's a wonderful energy to walk into a group of people who are just really enthusiastic about the work, and so working with Alan and Steven, it was terrific. I have such respect and admiration for both of them, And they always had really concise and good notes and information and direction. Everybody was very respectful of one another. Alan and Steven kind of came in and we went through the whole thing musically. Then they left me alone, and then Kirk and Gary and I kind of went through it, and we talked through, the scene and how the scene was going to go, and we talked through sort of the emotional part of it and the journey from beginning to end emotionally. And then, they left me in the booth. I shut my light off and sang in the dark, and they let me just go. And, we just did, they were all going for a performance. I think all of them are very have a special kind of respect and affection for live performance. And I think they all really understand kind of the performance as a whole, as opposed to, singing precisely each line and getting it just so. They were more interested in the overall performance from beginning to end. And so they really, gave me the space to perform in the booth. So, I'm so grateful for my experience with all of them.
How long do you think it took just to record that specific song? Was it a couple days, or was it, one session?
It was one day. It was one session. I was in early in the morning to sing along with the orchestra, so that the orchestra could hear me, so the conductor could hear me, and therefore conduct the orchestra accordingly. So I was in a booth for the morning while the orchestra recorded. And then we broke for lunch and came back and spent the afternoon recording my vocals. And then the chorus was brought in on a different session, if I'm remembering this correctly. But yeah, it was a day. I think I'm one of those because I'm a live performer. Really, recording, I get more obsessive over it, and so I'm one of those singers. I'm there till the bitter end. At 2:00 in the morning, and I'm still sitting there going, I could do it again. Do you need me to do another take? I can do another take. So, we recorded, we broke for dinner. I was essentially done, but I stuck around for the rest of the evening while they comped it. And then I think they kicked me out, somewhere around 1 or 2 a.m. But
hey, you're dedicated, and I totally get that, because I love to sing too, and I'm like, I would rather perfect it, have it as best as it can be, instead of like just doing this for another 5 days. You know what I mean? Let's go for it and let's get it done now and the best it can be. So with the Demi, did she ever hear your version prior to the film being released? Like, did you ever meet her and talk with her?
I never met her, oddly. I believe she heard my audition tape, but I don't know for sure what all was going on behind the scenes on that front. But I think she heard it. I hope she liked it.
I've never heard anything negative from her. Apparently she really loves the film. So what about Bette Midler? Because she performs the credits version of God Help the Outcasts.
The pop version. And no, actually I didn't meet Bette either. I did hear, I think someone gave me a little anecdote about her coming and watching the movie and just absolutely loving the song in the movie. So, but no, I didn't meet her either. So I met, interestingly, I actually, Paul Candell, who plays Clopin, Paul and I actually knew each other, and we had done a show together a few years prior up at Goodspeed Opera House, and we're actually really good friends. And so when I was hired and heard that Paul was doing it, I practically fell down. I was so excited. So I had a really, really close friend, sort of in that midst, which always makes everything a little easier.
It's amazing to think that both of you and the rest of the cast and the choir and the musicians put together this beautiful performance, something that a lot of Disney fans had never really heard before from a Disney film. And I think that's why that this soundtrack in particular, it with the talent involved, is why it's ranked always number one as the full soundtrack of a Disney film is the best one, hands down. And I agree too, fully agree with that, because it really plays in part with the story and the talent and the quality of the songs. So you're part of this wonderful film. Did you get to go to the actual premiere of the film and see it with an audience? And what did you think of that?
I did. I went to the New York premiere, which was, I think that was I also went to the one in New Orleans, which was, I mean, so huge. I almost didn't get my head around it. I did go to the one in New York, and we premiered the film at the Ziegfeld Theater down by Rockefeller Center, and then we did the premiere party afterwards up at St. John the Divine Church, which I don't know if you have ever heard of St. John the Divine, but it happens. It's a beautiful historic church in Manhattan, way up on the Upper West Side. It's a beautiful church in not only just in its architecture, but also it's kind of a very open and loving and kind of progressive church. They used to do I don't know if they do it anymore. They used to do the blessing of the animals every year, and on Halloween, when I was a kid growing up and into my adulthood, they would show wonderful, scary old black and white movies. And they'd usually have like a live organist playing, and they'd have characters dressed up kind of haunting the church while you were watching the movies. Just a really amazing place. And we had the opening party up there. And Alan and I got up, and Alan played piano for me, and I sang "God Help the Outcast" into Someday at the church, and that and with the window behind me. I mean, it was just one of those crazy moments. I was in this church that I'd loved since I was a kid, and there I am, sort of performing on opening night. So that's, I mean, one of my fond memories of that whole kind of whirlwind opening was being able to sing at St. John the Divine.
It's so cool to see how it's reached so many people, and it's one of those songs that still, Disney, it's like in the repertoire of songs that are very well known for all the right reasons, obviously. And maybe, do you think it plays in part to what is going on in the world today? Do you think that this song might be needed more than ever?
I think, I think there are some songs and some Disney songs, but just in general, some songs that go so finely to the heart and speak so simply and eloquently that they kind of stand the test of time. I didn't know that this song would necessarily hold up over the years, and it really has. And I think, I mean, I was personally, I couldn't have chosen a better moment for myself if someone had said, "You get to choose one Disney moment that you sing, what would you choose?" I mean, I don't think that I would have chosen anything other than this one. For the heart of the song, it's just timeless. It's one of those beautiful, simple, and yet so truthful and brutally honest songs, and those to me hold up. So I think I think we continue to go through things, and we'll never stop going through things. And it's those, it's those moments of real sort of humble and vulnerable honesty. I think that stand out and stand up. So I'm grateful for it. These are the types of songs that I have always gravitated to. The little gems, the quieter ones, but the ones that are kind of simple and straightforward and right, honest. So I think that's, I'm glad that it's holding up. I'm grateful that it's holding up, and I think that's probably why.
So I have 3 Disney-themed questions for you that I ask all of my guests. I call them the Fab 3. Okay. So we'll start with the Donald one, which is, as a child, what was one of your favorite Disney films to see in the movie theater?
I don't know that I saw Disney films in the movie theater. I'm trying to remember. Pinocchio was one of my early favorites, as was Dumbo, as was Fantasia.
And our goofy question, what Disney character do you think would be your best friend if you met them in person?
Oh my gosh. Gosh, I might have to say Jiminy Cricket.
And finally, our Mickey question. If I asked you to name any Disney song at this very moment, what immediately comes to mind?
Baby Mine.
Well, you've made so many people happy over the years with your beautiful singing portrayal with Esmeralda, and I do hope that, I know you've sung it before since then, and I really do cherish the song, and I love your performance, and that's why I will always keep my cassette tape, no matter what. So I thank you so much for being a part of the show and talking about your experience. It's so thrilling to hear of how this all came together for you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I don't get to talk about this very often, so it's been a real treat.